So today I'm going to be doing my first ever video of myself doing some cooking. Less cooking, more chopping stuff up and then applying fire to some meat actually. Fish meat today, just for your entertainment. What I wanted to talk about, because a lot of people are now following me because of my return from being injured and having gained quite a lot of weight back to competition. So before Christmas, long story short, I was over 123 kilos to be precise, and this morning I'm 107.8 kilos, which is quite good for 4 or 5 months. Everything I put on my Instagram channel is food that I cook myself for myself to achieve my goals. I don't have a particularly low carbohydrate diet, I don't have a particularly low fat diet, I have a relatively low energy diet, which goes hand in hand with my training, and which is planned quite well to allow me to continue training and continue making progress towards my weight goals. One of the big things that I do with all of my food, and the work I do nutritionally with clients as well, is draw on the research, draw on the science, and apply it to the food that they eat, the cooking and the education. So, one big thing that causes a problem for people when they're trying to manage their weight is satiety, is picking, is grazing. After they've learned everything about macros, everything about calories, supporting somebody through their food is quite a struggle because they don't quite understand appetite pathways, they don't quite understand satiety, or how to make food, or make food choices which will keep them full, because they believe that they need to take the a la high protein this, which isn't a terrible choice, or the low fat, low calorie this, or they just play around with their if it fits your macros. And you get the type of person who crams in everything they can into their macros. I see that quite a lot. The whole, I've got 400 calories left, what can I get in 400 calories? Ice cream, this, and this. It's not a great way to do it for the most part, in my opinion. It should be, I have 400 calories to fit in, what sort of food can I fit into that, which is going to be satiating, which is going to make me feel good. And then yes, if you have little bits left over, by all means eat into them, but don't be that person who looks at their phone at the end of the day and goes, I've got 400 calories left, what can I cram into this, which is as disgusting as possible. If anything, that can be a negative, that can lead to more overeating, that can lead to what we call compensatory behaviours around food. So, big impact on whether people, and general population this is especially true of, because they are still mostly in their learning journey, is to look at foods which do help us remove those compensatory eating behaviours. The, oh, I've eaten this and I'm hungry again later because I'm not satiated, or it's triggered a cycle in me. Now, a couple of years ago, British Journal of Nutrition, and there's a lot of emerging research on this, and I love drawing this into my food and into my cooking, and using this to help me achieve my goals. There's a lot of research coming into this now from the British Journal of Nutrition and some Japanese journals as well on satiety and controlling behaviours around food. Now, the British Journal of Nutrition reported several years ago that food companies are very heavily responsible for influencing people's satiety and affecting their food behaviours through controlling compensatory eating. And that comes down to these very, very clever people designing meals will know what makes people full up, will know what makes people want to eat more, want to go into the packet more. And that can be quite important. We can use that to help ourselves as well. So a compensatory eating behaviour, or something that influences satiety, is going to be defined as something that is going to decrease spontaneous eating habits after consumption later in the day. If something's not very satiating, your spontaneous eating habits are probably going to increase throughout the rest of the day. So every meal that you choose to eat needs to take into account, when you're restricting calories, when you're trying to bring your body fat back in line, it needs to take that into account. Yes, for 400 or 500 macros I can have a McDonald's if I want, but it's not satiating for several reasons. And it's not going to help me for the rest of the day. It's going to lead to an overeating behaviour. So whilst you're educating people on if it fits your macros and what they can do to, flex their diet and eat what they want, at the same time they need to be aware of making sensible food choices to support that. So foods obviously contain various different micronutrients, various different components that make them whole. And these things within them are going to be what affect satiety. Things like fibre content, micronutritional value, and some research points to calcium content, I'm not sure why that is, affecting satiety later in the day. The actual volume of the food, the size of the food you eat. So a 400 calorie dish the palm of my hand versus a 400 calorie dish the size of my chopping board here is going to have a different effect on satiety, so food volume fills you. It's also suggested that the glycemic index of the carbohydrates in that meal have an effect as well. Also, things like the caffeine content of the food that you eat have an effect on your later food compensatory behaviours or how satiated you are. Compounds which we refer to as anorectic. Now, the things that you choose to eat can take a few of these factors, combine them, they're very synergistic. And the more of these that play into the food, so the more large portioned, nutritionally dense, high fibre, low glycemic index food you eat, the better it's going to be. Another huge factor that plays into whether or not you enjoy your food or whether or not you're going to be satiated for a while is the palatability of the food. So it needs to be food that you enjoy. So when you jump on the Fit Pro bandwagon and you start bashing back cauliflower rice, which tastes like crap, it's not really going to help. It's not very nutritionally dense. It does bulk the food out. Generally, to most people, it's not very palatable. It's a slippery slope to compensatory eating behaviours. So you need to make sure the food you're cooking is food that you like to eat. The food you're making is food you like to eat. For the record, someone commented on my Instagram the other day to say that I put too much milk in my tea. I don't think that's too bad. It's like darker than my pasty arms. So with that in mind, with the British Journal of Nutrition Research, there are certain foods which I tend to cook on a pretty common or regular basis. And they're twists on normal foods that most people eat from day to day. So if I'm going for restricting my calories, I need to be able to bulk my food portions out, because for someone like me, a meal which is going to be less than 500 calories needs to be a pretty big meal, otherwise it's not going to be very satiating. So one of my go-to foods is always going to be a salsa, or something to put alongside the cooked element of the food that's going to taste good and be nutritionally dense and work with the flavours. So, a lot of salsas use lots of tomato, lots of pepper, lots of spice, lots of sweetness in order to create that salsary flavour. You end up with a large amount of calories coming from the sugar. Not that sugar is a bad thing, but we're trying to draw as many calories out of the food as possible in all of the side dishes we put in for most of our cooking, and keep the calories where it counts, which tends to be in the main feature part of the meal, which can be the meat component, or the generally the meat component. let's not beat around the bush there. So one thing I tend to do a lot, I take red cabbage. Take red cabbage, tomato puree, and garlic puree to make the base of most of my salsas. And then to get the tangy sweet taste, I use cider vinegar. Not because it helps with balancing my body's pH, nothing like that, because it complements very well when you make a salsa. When you make the salsa though, you need to pop the cabbage in first with the other ingredients. I find that because red cabbage, when it's raw, has got quite a bitter taste, it's got quite a strong taste, and just mixing it up first while you're doing other tasks with the cider vinegar, the garlic and the tomato helps just leach all the flavours together, helps make a good start. So one of the reasons we do this is, as I said, to do with some of the research on food volumization, satiety, all the different factors that play into stopping you overeating. Right? If there is some really good research out of Japan from, I think about 2012, I think, so quite recent as well, with Japanese students. Right? And in Japan, students have a very good regimented life. They will consume their ramen, bowl of noodles, those of you who've gone to Wagamama, brilliant food, every day quite religiously for their lunch. They'll go about it, they have it how they like it, and they crack on with the rest of the day eating as normal, ad-lib eating. People are very much creatures of habit as well. The nice thing about dishes like a ramen, which is something I'll be looking at in a few weeks' time, is how much you can tweak a very simple dish. So the more ingredients in a dish, the more fun or the easier it is to tweak it. So what's the easiest way to pull calories out of a ramen? They're usually noodle-based dishes. Us in the fitness industry, we have zero noodles. If you can make zero noodles taste indistinguishable from normal noodles, you won't really know the difference. It's referred to as covertly playing with your food, which has an impact on satiety levels, which again, later in the day has been shown to reduce sporadic eating, or just spontaneous eating. So this research out of Japan took Japanese students who ate their ramens every day. And the average calorie content of their ramen was, at lunchtime from their cafeteria, around the 450 to 500 calorie mark. If that ramen was then played around with, so the stock, the soup, the sauce that the noodles and the meat sit in, can be made to be more energy dense or less energy dense. You can change the ratio of vegetables to meat. You can use different cuts of meat, fattier cuts of meat, leaner cuts of meat, thinner cuts of meat. All of those different things which keep the volume of the dish the same but affect the calorie content can be played with. Now, this particular experimental protocol started with the 500-ish calorie dish and took several different approaches to take that dish down to as low as 200 and as high as 1200 calories, adding red onion chopped up into my salsa right now. When students were given the dishes with no modifications, their eating habits were monitored for the rest of the day over a couple of days to work out what their rough energy intake each day was, what their habits were. When you then presented them with the dishes that had been tweaked by up to sort of 600 calories, their eating behaviours, as long as the meals were matched for palatability, so they were basically indistinguishable in taste, volume, and visually, so they didn't look different either, their eating behaviours didn't change. As soon as the meals were changed so that the energy density was increased by using, say, fattier cuts of meat and everything else was left the same, so that the meal didn't change in volume, or the volume of the meal got smaller, people's eating behaviours immediately started to change, and you started to see compensatory eating later in the day. They'd had a smaller meal. When the meal used subpar ingredients, the really crappy ones nobody likes, i.e. cauliflower rice example, again the calories were lowered, but people then went on and started to eat more food later. They weren't satiated in the same way. Their normal old habits weren't satisfied. So people are creatures of habit. So they need to enjoy their food, and they need to eat the food that they're regularly eating anyway. So there's the first sort of bit of food for thought when you're planning meals. If you have a dish that you love, find a way to bulk it out, find a way to tweak it, make it part of your staples again. You'll enjoy it more that way. So I'm very slowly cutting cherry tomatoes while I'm talking, because again I'm making this salsa. So for me, this salsa is going to complement some fish, which I'm going to griddle. So my change in this normal dish, sort of classic summertime barbecue dish, would be meat, salsa, a bit of bread, right? I'm bringing the calorie content of my meal down in this instance by bulking out the salsa, by not using the sweet sticky sauce, which you would use on normal salsa, so making it a bit more fiery, still just as palatable. And I'm using white fish instead of the chicken. So the two key areas that I'm bringing my calories down in this meal are going to be carbs and fats, whilst maintaining an increase in protein level and maintaining the tastiness of the dish. So obviously keeping protein elevated is generally a priority for most people, especially when they're cutting calories, especially when, like myself, you're cutting calories as much as you comfortably can. I generally feel a small amount of hunger throughout the day at the moment because my calories are relatively low. You know, I kind of go a bit heavier than people's normal recommendations of stick at 500 and play it slowly. I tend to push myself a bit harder because I can, which means I need to pay extra attention to these different sort of prep methods and different attention to the food that I'm cooking. Okay, so my calories can be dropped just by tweaking the sauce that I use in my salsa and making it myself, so I know it's got the higher fibre content, more micronutrition, and choosing a different cut of meat, or i.e. going for fish, and using slightly different flavours. I can drop sort of 200 calories from a single meal while still having a fuck-off massive meal. That's really important. Okay, next bit for the salsa, bit of red pepper. This will help add sweetness. So again, understanding what different ingredients add to your foods is really important as well. I'm also going to add some herbs and spices. So I'm going to add some, well, just dried coriander leaf. And again, using ingredients that can be very, very cheap and very easy, because again, I still have to live. I still have to be able to pay for all this food. So I don't want to be spending £10 on a bag of ready done cauliflower rice. I just want to be making up a really nice, fragrant and easy to eat salsa, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm going to show you a really good trick for dressings using cucumber. Right? Cucumber is literally calories. I quite like this part. It seems a shame to waste it, so I'm going to keep that. You want a really refreshing, really tasty dip. Take as much of the peel off of the cucumber as is comfortable. Don't worry if it's not too bad. That's just going to get chunked up. The liquid inside the cucumber tastes awesome when prepared properly. There's probably also some hippie benefit about that. My alkalinity is probably dropping right now just from that. Tiny bit of cider vinegar. Your old friend the NutriBullet. Pop those in there. I probably need a catchphrase for when I put stuff in stuff. We can run a poll for that. I'll come up with one. Have some of that, you cunt. Slosh of cider vinegar, just enough so that this will blend up. Now, tastes good. Slosh some of that over the salsa too. I'm also going to use that on the fish. Crazy low calorie, tastes great. So now my salsa is going to taste extra fresh. Because I'm pretty much done with my salsa, I'm just going to turn this on. Let's get some heat going on my grill. Keep these for later. The dog likes them. Always grinds of pepper on everything. Flakes of salt. Always taste good. So, like we were saying, one of the big failures that people have when they're trying to manage their weight is best intentions going 2 feet forward into their new eating regime. They'll either rely solely on diet foods they've bought, which might not satisfy this criteria, or they'll make their wonderful diet food and you'll see all the lovely pictures on Instagram and they're like, look at me, I'm having 2 leaves of fucking spinach and a whisper of avocado, and I'm going to play a soundtrack of oranges growing on a tree, and that will fill me up. And then they wonder why they start to fall off the wagon a couple of weeks down the line. It's just because they're not satisfying criteria that keeps them happy. Diets are quite demanding. This is why people come up with different routines, like, oh, I'm going to have my cheat meal on the weekend, because my diet is so dull that I need a weekend to eat whatever I want, just to get my sanity back. Don't get me wrong, diet breaks can be a very good thing, because, yeah, I eat this a lot, but you know what I'd rather be eating? A fuck off massive burger and just not caring. Much rather be doing that. Don't get me wrong. But to have that option, this is good. Now I'm aware that this is very low carb, so again, controlling my meal portion size whilst I bulked out with other areas, I'm just going to toast a little bit of a pita bread on my grill. Just because it is very low carb, and I can't be doing with mega low carb. I'm still a growing boy. While that's doing that, won't take long at all. Let's allow that to burn. Hit up my dishwasher. Try not to set fire to myself. Take that. Take a tiny bit of coriander leaf, because I haven't done that yet, sprinkle that through there too. So lots of flavours, lots and lots of flavours. I'm not going to bullshit you with shit like, oh yes, the coriander does wonders for your thyroids. All I'm going to do with this whitefish is a tiny bit of seasoning on there, dried garlic granules. I'm going to use this, which is this vinegary, cucumbery blend. Pour that over. Let my grill and the lava rocks get nice and hot. I'm sure somewhere. I've got so many barbecue tools in my kitchen in various places that I must have something I can poke a grill with inside that isn't outside. Also scratch my knee with, too. There we go. Because this is fish, again, seasoning tip, you very rarely need to season or marinate fish for that long unless you're using like a yogurt-based sauce. And I want this to cook crazy quick because I don't want you to have to sit here watching me all day. So I'm actually going to slice these in half, just so they get done faster. Too impatient to wait for white fish to cook. And again, cost efficient. You know, these are just frozen bassa fillets, which I have defrosted earlier. There we go. Pop these on. I've got lava rocks inside my indoor grill, hoping I don't start a fire. Good sizzle. So this won't take long at all. I'll slosh some of this over one last time while they're cooking. I'll be a good boy, put my stuff in the sink to wash. Later, maybe tomorrow. Now I'll tidy up, not that bad. Take that. Slide my grill while it's cooking out the way, very dangerous. Get my salsa. There's so much in this that I don't actually even need to use a full amount. Another thing, plates, visually, I've got a massive plate because it looks prettier, but smaller plate, bigger looking portion, it's all in the mind, play with it. But that's quite a large portion already. Wait, there's the camera. What am I using it for? Where's my prong? There we go. Give these a quick flip because I really just want them nicely seared. Could be a bit hotter. So yeah, you're well on your way now to your first bit of evidence-based cooking. So this meal is supported by British Journal of Nutrition, and I'm not sure what the Japanese journal was. I'm not sure where that was published. If you're interested though, I will pop full references to what I talk about in all these videos somewhere somewhere where you can find them. But the way I do this with clients is I like to bring clients into my kitchen anyway. So a lot of people who have worked with me have been here, have had me cook for them, have had me discuss all of this with them and talk to them about the reasons why we do stuff and the food choices we make. So this is why it becomes so important to do things with clients like diaries about the food choices that they like to make, or trigger foods so you know what they're aware of, and finding ways to get around those, incorporate them, bulk them out so that they're less palatable. Or not less palatable, so they're easier to manage for people. All important. So again, just to reiterate, if you want a meal that's going to stop you having the compensatory food behaviours later on in the day, or just later on in general, it has to tick several boxes. It can't be a tiny little tidbit. It's got to be filling, so food volume plays a big role there. It's got to be nutritionally dense, so it's got to have colour, variety, fibre. Ideally, now this is contested, I can bring up just as many studies to support as refute, but a lower glycemic index, so steering clear of the high sugar foods, so starting to put the higher fibre carbohydrates in there. Fruit is still pretty low GI in general, things like that to bulk foods out. It's got to taste good, it's got to be food that you want to eat, food that's exciting. So I find food that has lots of scent, lots of smell, lots of colour, lots of texture more exciting for me. So that's food I want to eat. So one reason why I do so much cooking over fire. Look, I threw food on the table. Whoops. So much cooking over fire. And also it's involved as well. If it looks pretty, you're probably going to enjoy eating it. Right. These are going to be cooked enough. So nice bit of charred fish, sit that there, sit that there. The other effect that actually cutting this fish in half has done is it's made it look like I've got a shit ton more food than I have. Again, another important aspect in preparing food that's going to keep you satiated and help you enjoy your diet and keep you on track. More food, more likely to stick to it. Okay? So, that's not taken too long. There we go. Enjoy.